into the meeting here. So folks, this is the Planning Commission meeting. We're just going through trying to get one more commissioner on the line here so that we could start. We plan to start here shortly. So appreciate your indulgence in that. We're just trying to get a meeting connection over to a commissioner that's not here at the moment. And so it looks like Dan is teacher, our city administrator and IT specialist is working away at that one as we speak. So, Mr. Chair, I'll leave it up to you as far as what you'd like to do at this point. If you'd like to begin the meeting at this point, and Commissioner Siebenauer can join us when we're able to access her, or we could wait. It's up to you.
Well, I want to give it a few minutes and couple minutes maybe.
Okay.
Probably seem like an eternity.
Oh, I think I've got her here. Okay, never mind. I see her in the audience. And
she may be trying to text you as well, John.
Yeah, it looks like it here.
She's in the audience.
Yeah, she's in the audience, Dan. For some reason I'm not able to promote people from the audience. Which is.
All right, well, I'll do it. Is she the one that's listed as the phone number?
She is. Yeah, she's the phone number on there. And I also have Dave on there that I inadvertently promoted to panelist. So, but I can't bring him back for some reason. So Lisa, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think we just have, and Dan, are you able to put Dave back as an attendee?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we've got something different between our screens. Mine shows that Dave is an attendee.
Okay. All right. Well, if that's the case, I think we've got everybody here. So, Mr. Chair, if you want to begin the meeting, I think we can do so.
Okay, well, let's call this meeting to order then. This is a regular meeting, the April 13th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting. I'm just going to start with a bit of an announcement here regarding our new format. City administrators determined that an in-person meeting is neither practical nor prudent because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting declaration of federal, state, and local emergencies pursuant to Minnesota statutes, Chapter 12, and other laws. Further attendance of the meeting by any member of the Planning Commission, city staff, or the public at the regular meeting location in the city council chambers is not feasible due to the COVID-19 pandemic and closure of the city hall to the members of the public. As a result of the foregoing, the Planning Commission meeting will be conducted solely by video conference format, telephone, or other electronic means as provided in Minnesota statutes, section 13D.021. And no in-person meeting will be conducted in the city council chambers. I think it's important to recognize that using the video conferencing is not as good as an in-person meeting, but under the circumstances is necessary. Keep in mind, we're doing the best we can to maintain transparency and due process. I would appreciate everyone's patience and cooperation as we work through the meeting. Also, just a reminder to the commissioners, all votes tonight must be roll call votes to comply with state statute requirements for holding electronic meetings. So we'll probably ask the city staff to call roll when that time comes. All right. First item on the agenda, approval of minutes from the March 9th meeting. Commissioners, any comments? corrections? Hearing none. All those in favor, we call roll now, right?
Yep, we call roll outs. Like I can do that. Commissioner Romans,
Aye.
Messina,
Aye.
Commissioner Best,
I would say aye, but I was not at that meeting, so not sure if I can still vote with that.
sure,
Remember.
you could abstain if you'd like, Commissioner.
Okay, I'll abstain.
Okay, Commissioner Hallberg.
Aye.
Commissioner Siebenhaler. All right, just seeing if Commissioner Siebenhaler, can you able to hear us and reply? Yeah, doesn't look like she's muted at this point, but she noted a text to me that she was having, that she wasn't sure if she was. I guess she replied aye via text. So I have that.
We could do a thumbs
And-
up.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
At first time it didn't come through, so yes, I am voting aye on that. On
Okay.
the previous minutes.
Okay, and Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Did I call Commissioner Hallberg? It did. Okay, then I think it's 5 ayes, one abstention on the minutes.
Okay, and so approved. We have a number of public hearings tonight. We are going to be first looking at the Kisme Ventures special use permit 2020-14 neighborhood commercial use. United Promotions use of former Kateria Schmidt Funeral Home, 201 East 7th Street. Staff report by Justin Fortney. You're muted, Justin.
Thank you for that. The Planning Commission is asked to review the proposed special use permit for neighborhood commercial and make a recommendation to City Council. The special use permit for neighborhood commercial may allow business-related activities with no adverse changes to the residential character of the neighborhood. The provision contains several stipulations on appropriate sites, businesses, and conditions of operation. The former use or design of an existing building is not consideration for any of the neighborhood commercial requirements of the zoning ordinance. Kirby Ventures Commercial LLC, doing business as United Promotions, formerly as Specialties, located at 1206 North Frontage Road, is a company specializing in the decorating of apparel and promotional items with screen printing, heat press, and embroidery. The business has outgrown their current 4,800 square foot commercial facility located at 1206 North Frontage Road. Their working operations include the following details. Their normal working hours are between 8:30 a.m. and 5 o'clock p.m. Monday through Friday. This is when management, sales, customer service, and design staff are present. And production runs 2 shifts during busy times, 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. and 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. Deliveries and pickups are done by standard UPS and FedEx trucks daily. They each deliver every morning and each pick up every afternoon during standard business hours. They use employee vehicles to pick up and deliver orders from their largest customer. This could involve between 1 and 4 trips daily. Receive an occasional delivery from Speedy Delivery. Customers hire courier services for deliveries at their location. They currently have a small number of retail customers that do come to the business. These customers are limited to Hastings High School letter jackets, but are being phased out. Property for the neighborhood commercial proposal is the former funeral home located at 201 7th Street East. It was constructed in 1959 as a funeral home and is about 7,300 square feet in size. It's been for sale for several months. It's September of 2019, an application for home occupation by Dean and Shirley Markison to operate Foss and Swanson Veterans, a community center, museum, and library was denied for the following reasons. The operation of the home occupation would have caused additional parking and traffic than would normally be expected in a residential neighborhood. The proposed community center would provide events for up to 150 individuals. Center operations proposed as part of that home occupation were more intensive than other allowed uses within the R2 zoning district and not consistent with the general residential nature of the area. Is zoned R2, which is medium density residential. The intent of the district, as stated in the zoning ordinance, is to protect those predominantly single family residential areas within Hastings that were developed as prior to World War II, encroachment from potential conflicting uses, and provide for future residential and related development consistent with proper existing development, neighborhood character, and minimum maintaining standards for provisions of health, light, and visual appeal. Allowable uses for properties in this district include single and two-family residence, apartments, neighborhood commercial, funeral home, residential care facilities, which would be a nursing home, fire station, library, or bed and breakfast. Ordinance contains the following conditions for approval of a special use permit for neighborhood commercial. This related activity occurring on the premises shall not cause any adverse changes to the residential character of the neighborhood. Staff believes that the proposed operations appear to be more intense than the existing character of the neighborhood. The business certainly creates more traffic with up to 24 daily employees coming to the site and between 5 and 10 deliveries per day. Operational hours are much later than the neighborhood. Operations of the second shift may not be evident from outside of the building, but the 2 to 18 employees leaving the site after 11 p.m. could be a nuisance to the neighborhood. Adherence to the minimum parking standards for this site and use would require about 25 spaces. Parking is not currently well defined on the site, but they could maybe fit between 10 and 12 cars on the site. The applicants have stated that a parking lot agreement could be obtained from St. Luke's Episcopal Church across Sibley Street, which would have spaces available during the hours of business. No retail operations are allowed at the site. The business currently sells Hastings High School letter jackets retail, but are phasing that component out. Operation of any business shall be in conformance to the residential character of the neighborhood. I mentioned earlier, the site would have more deliveries, individuals, and cars on the site than is character for the neighborhood. The hours of operation would go until 11 p.m., which is much later than other activities of the area. The property shall be considered. Properties not fronting on a major roadway or adjacent to a commercial zoning district may be unsuitable for operation of neighborhood commercial use. Is not situated adjacent to a major roadway or commercial district. Exterior change must be compatible with a residential neighborhood. Of course, the building is pre-existing and they're not proposing any exterior changes. So deliveries, products, and merchandise or supplies shall be limited to 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and occur only with single rear axle, straight trucks, or smaller vehicles. Deliveries and pickups would be done by UPS and FedEx trucks twice daily. They would each deliver sometime in the morning and pick up again in the afternoon, all during business hours, along with some employee vehicles being used to pick up and deliver orders to their largest customer, from 1 to 4 daily trips and an occasional speedy delivery, in addition to courier services. Delivery is consistent with the neighborhood, although the intensity is certainly much higher. Interior changes must receive proper authorization and permits, and I'm sure the applicant would intend to do that. And it would be a condition, of course, on any approval. Signage may not consist of more than one single wall sign per home with a maximum of 2 square feet. The applicant said that is not ideal, but they don't have a strong need for advertising. To the business shall not generate noise, glare, vibrations, fume, or odors. Pardon me. The applicant does not believe this would cause an issue, although it's not an ideal guarantee to resolve any issues, but possible violations could be handled through enforcement of this provision of the special use permit or the city's nuisance. These were not reported issues at their existing location. However, their existing location is in a commercial district and that's a frontage road of a highway with few neighboring properties. Traffic shall generate business greater volumes that would normally be expected in a residential neighborhood. The occupation shall not increase parking requirements by more than 4 additional spaces at any given time in addition to the parking of the occupants. Parking generated by the home occupation shall be met street. Doesn't appear to be enough off-street spots at the current location for the 24 employees and of the 2 shifts between 7 and 11. It would be beyond what is expected of residential areas. The applicant would certainly have to address the parking needs off-street with the parking agreement, as they'd mentioned, or a parking lot expansion on the site. Staff isn't exactly sure what the limitation in this provision is for 4 additional parking spaces, as it's contrary to Section 2 that requires adherence to the parking standards. Residential properties in the area are limited to 3 outside vehicles at their property at any given time. This is certainly inconsistent with the proposal having 24. Business shall be allowed to jeopardize the health safety of residents, and the fire marshal may conduct a fire safety inspection of the property. There's also a couple of general special use permit requirements listed in the zoning ordinance. Staff believes that all of those are met except for item H, which is the general compatibility with adjacent properties and other property in the district. As I mentioned earlier, the proposed business appears to be due to the vehicles, staff, and deliveries along with the hours of operation. Within 350 feet were notified of the special use permit request. Staff received an email from Principal Tim Sullivan of C's School, who said that they're not proposed to the proposal as it sounded like a quiet use. Letters of in support were included with the application from some property owners in the area. A resident of the neighborhood, Dennis Piney, called staff and explained he's opposed to the intense use in the residential neighborhood. He said that it does not belong in this or any neighborhood. He also added that it wouldn't be discussed if it were proposed in any other neighborhood in the city. Is supportive of the business and would certainly like them to stay in Hastings. The principal component of the business is production. This type of business is not allowed in any of the commercial districts in the city, as it's not a primary office, entertainment, lodging, or retail use. The purpose and intent of the city's I-1 industrial park is to establish land to serve these businesses that are vital for providing area residents jobs and contribute to the tax base of the community. Placed a great deal of effort in trying to find businesses like this to locate in the Hastings Industrial Park. The city has lots available for as little as $1 per acre for sites to build on. These sites would allow business to design and structure a structure that would maximize their efficiency and process, and that would also allow for efficient expansion as the business grows. Believes that the operation of the business at this site would not conform to the residential character of the neighborhood and would cause adverse changes to the residential character based on the findings listed earlier. The location of the site not being on a major roadway or adjacent to commercial zoning district, the intensity of the business production and number of staff in the long and late hours of operation, substantial parking needs and high amount of traffic generated by employees and deliveries, the negative impacts on the surrounding neighborhood cannot be sufficiently mitigated through any imposition of reasonable conditions. Does not believe this use can conform to the residential character of the neighborhood. Recommend some conditions that are in your staff report that should be part of any potential motion for approval. We'll go through a couple of share. This is an aerial picture of the proposed site that's being proposed, that's outlined in orange. And across Sibley Street is the parking lot. They would potentially be able to get a lease for use of. And this is aerial picture of the proposed business's current location on North Frontage Road. And a photograph of that location. And I've got a few pictures of the proposed site. Business would be proposing to locate. That's, I can stand for any questions before or after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. I suspect we should just jump into the public hearing. John, do we have some people out there?
Mr. Chair, we do have a raised hand here from Dave in the audience, so I'm going to bring Dave into the meeting to see if he would like to address the commission. He should be
Okay.
shortly.
Let's open the public hearing then, and we'll hear from the public.
Okay, Dave, can you hear us? Can you hear us, Dave? I see he's in the meeting, and I see that it appears his microphone is not muted at this point.
There's Dave.
Oh, there he is. I'm talking, but I can't hear him for some reason. See, unmute and unmute. There. What's
Can't
going
hear
on?
you. Oh. Can you hear us, Dave? We can't hear you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I know with some of these, you have to sign in through an internet audio for the microphone to work. That's something that Dave's tried.
Call
Call a number in, huh? Trying to think of the best way to do this here.
I don't know how Zoom works, but on that note, what Rob was talking about, I've used a phone number before to run my audio over the phone line.
Yeah. So,
I don't know how that works with Zoom. I think that was with a Google chat room thing.
okay.
What if we just turn on the chat feature and if the questions are short,
Okay.
if it's something you could
Try
type?
that.
All right. And you gonna enable that, Dan?
It is enabled.
Okay, so Dave, if you could type in with the chat feature, maybe we can get to it on that end of it here. Yeah, it looks like he's put
That
something.
works. Here's a test message.
Yeah.
And I guess as tradition would have it, we would like to know your name and address.
Do you see the message, Mr. Chair?
I do, and so I'll just read that here. I sent a detailed document to Lonnie, Jesse Starkton's attorney, earlier today addressing many concerns.
Okay. And I see Mr. Thomas's hands in the audience. Perhaps we could try him and maybe he can relay some of the comments that Mr. Kisby has as well. So maybe I'll bring Mr. Whoop. Yes.
Try just activating the enable talk, disable talk. You don't need to pull them from attendee into panelist just to get their audio.
So what you're saying is go back to attendee here and
Simply allow to talk.
all right, let's see. Because right now he's on the panel. So are you suggesting I put him back down to attendee and then try it that way?
We've got different screens.
Okay. Right now I have him under panelists. What I'd suggest at this point would be to, I believe Mr. Thomas is the attorney representing both Mr. Kisby and Mr. Starkson related to this application. And perhaps we can have his audio may work. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, I would bring Mr. Thomas into the meeting.
Please do. That would be appropriate.
Okay, we'll put Mr. Thomas in here. So he should be in here in just a moment. Okay.
This is Lonnie Thomas. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Yeah, I was going to, hopefully I'll cover what Dave had to say. In preparing for this, I've been talking to Dave throughout the day today, asking or answering specific questions that I had. Mr. Fortney gave a pretty thorough summary, if not reading, of his special report. So I think we're on the same page. I would just make a couple of preliminary comments. One being that this is not really a manufacturing business. In fact, it would probably, because of the nature of what it produces, it's more akin to some like an artwork type business. Not that T-shirts are a piece of art. Maybe they are to some, but my point is this is not a heavy manufacturing or machining type business. Second, I think that there might be some confusion, which was an issue that I was addressing with Dave today, which is this really is an 8:30 to 5 business. It may have 24 employees when it's running at peak operation, but 8:30 to 5 is its normal business hours. It does have a handful of people that Dave describes to me as not generally fewer than one, but not more than 5 who will come in at about 7. And then the second shift would leave at about 11 with, again, the same 1 to 5 people. But the main body of employees is going to be about a dozen people or thereabouts that work from 8:30 to 5. To point out that, I don't know, your average residents, people are leaving for work at 7 in the morning and coming home from 11, and that doesn't include early days. I was a policeman and my wife was an accountant, and so we worked completely different hours. So people are coming and going. So the main business hours is when most of the employees are going to be coming and going, and after and before and after that, it's only going to be a couple of people. The pictures that Mr. Fortney showed are obviously accurately depict what the property looks like. He described it as over 7,000 square feet. It has obviously limited uses. It's zoned density residential, but it's a funeral home. And if you look at the pictures, obviously it's going to be pretty hard to figure out how you're going to use this for anything if you don't find a way to bring it in as some sort of a neighborhood commercial. It's currently a funeral home. Fortney points out that Mr. Fortney points out that you're not supposed to consider the historical use of the property in your analysis. I couldn't find a zoning ordinance provision that says that, but he says it with confidence, so I assume he knows what he's talking about. He's the planner. And I don't think we need to do that because it doesn't matter if it's the historical use. Funeral home is an allowed use right now anyway. So forget about the historical use. Mr. Fortney's staff report, it's a good staff report. It's thorough. It goes through all the ordinances that pretty much were addressed in what I submitted. But it's odd in one way in that it's about a 7-page staff report, and it gives you 6 pages of why you ought to approve the application. And at the end of it, he says, but my opinion is that you shouldn't approve it. I recommend against approval. Submit that the 6 pages are really specific findings, go to specific issues that are in your zoning ordinance that go to determining whether or not the proposed use fits into the neighborhood spaces, when you can operate, how you're going to operate. All those things are there, and this proposed use satisfies all of those, and he seems to agree. Where he and I disagree is just after going through all of those, he says, but notwithstanding the fact that they seem to meet everything that we require, exterior changes, interior changes, fire marshal compliance, parking standards. I wouldn't have brought this to you if I had not studied your zoning ordinance and determined that. One of the first things I look at in a matter like this is parking spaces. It's always difficult. I made sure that we have at least an oral agreement with the church. I didn't want to take the time to reduce it to writing, but your zoning ordinance says that it needs to be in recordable form. So I will put together either an easement or a lease, and it will be recordable, and I'll make sure that Mr. Fortney approves it. So if you look at, on the last couple paragraphs where he finally says, but notwithstanding all this, I just don't think that this fits into this neighborhood. He gives you, by my notes, he gives you 5 reasons. Too many deliveries. Well, I think that he accurately describes the number of deliveries by my memory. A couple in the morning, a couple in the afternoon. Some clients maybe deliver their own or pick them up or whatever. I mean, I think his facts are accurate. There's nothing in the ordinance that says how many is too many. I live in Egan, and in my little neighborhood, especially these days, my neighbor gets more deliveries than that. Most of them say Amazon on them. And I don't know what it's going to be like when this mess is over, but I mean, I suspect a lot of people are going to realize that it's a pretty easy way to shop. But this is not, I don't know what too many deliveries is. The hours of operation, again, I addressed above. I just want to make sure that you understand the true facts as far as the limitation or the limited hours that there really are. How many employees are really coming and going? It's 8:30 to 5 is the normal business hours, which is just about the same as the school. It's a block away. Needs are addressed. Again, you're gonna impose that as a term on the special use permit. And on that point, I would really request you to consider, is there anything here when it comes to looking at all of the requirements? Because and he's not wrong, Mr. Fortney's got about almost 20 different issues that need to be satisfied. And I, again, respectfully submit that we've satisfied every one of them. And parking needs is another. He gives 5 reasons in his final couple paragraphs. The 4th is nature of the business. In the zoning ordinance, it says that any specific business, that's why you have specific tests. To see if it fits. You can't define every potential business that may or may not fit. You've got to go to specific tests, things that will go to affecting the neighborhood. The high number of employees. Well, again, we've laid out how many there are. There's going to be about a dozen. They're going to work 8:30 to 5, and there's going to be 1 to 5. They're going to be a little earlier than that, and another 1 to 5 a little later than that. Again, that's like neighbors coming and going. Going through all of that, and given the comment that we don't want to look at the historical use of the property, and I'm not going to argue that because I'll probably lose because he knows his zoning ordinance better than I do. we don't need to look at the historical use. Let's look at what the zoning ordinance says and what hints we can get from that as to what would be right. First of all, I would suggest that if you got 6 pages of compliance and satisfaction with zoning ordinances, that should be the end of the discussion. That they jump through all the hoops. They seem to meet all the standards. You go beyond that, then I think if you want to look at the zoning ordinance and try to figure out what did the crafters of this have in mind? Does this fit? Yes, they don't look at historic use. Look at what it says are allowed uses that you can't even control through your special use permit authority. Look at those. I want to pick out just 3. 1, funeral home. Well, a funeral home is way more intense than this proposed use. I would say that every person who bought a house in that neighborhood, unless they're older than me, house knowing that funeral home was there and it was an operational funeral home, it would be more intense than the proposed use. So the complaint about it, and my understanding is you've got 1. A little difficult to, I mean, in good faith, you bought it knowing it was a funeral home, and we have a proposed use that's less intense, and you're complaining about it. Homes, visitors all hours of the day, unlimited visits. This one operated without access to additional parking, far more traffic, people parking on the street. We've addressed all of that. Allowed use, again, no authority to do anything with special use permits to make it conform to what you'd like. Station. And you're really going to argue that a fire station would be more or would be less intense use? Vehicles coming out 24/7, sirens, red lights, disruption to the neighborhood. You'd have, fire people obviously work 24 hours a day. They're going to be coming and going in their shifts. Third use that's allowed, again, not by conditional use permit or special use, is what your zoning ordinance calls it. Library. People who come to public libraries come here to get a book. They're there for, an hour. Maybe. They come and go. And so there's a constant turnover of people who are coming in. They're going to have to be parking on the street because there wouldn't be parking there. A public library hosts special events, which they are very commonly do. Bigger problems. Again, not nearly as intense as what we're requesting here. Conclusion, we would request that you read the first 6 pages and conclude these guys have jumped through every one of our hoops and they seem to fit. Respectfully disagree with your final opinion, which is based upon your opinion and not our zoning ordinance. Would respectfully again submit to you that to pass anything if Mr. Fortney can just say, seem to meet all the standards that we've applied to them. I conclude that in my mind, this just doesn't fit. Again, I understand I'm paid to disagree with Mr. Fortney. I don't know if he's paid to disagree with me, but he does, and we just have an honest disagreement here. But I would, again, request that the standards that are in your zoning ordinance. And the first 6 pages of the zoning ordinance pretty much say they fit everything they've asked us to do. I still don't think it fits in this neighborhood. And he has given you conditions for the issuance of the special permit should you decide that you're willing to go there and do that, which I'm requesting you to do. We can live with every one of those conditions. We think those are fair. They're generally what your ordinance requires anyway. So, and if they do prove to be some reason this business does prove to be disruptive to the neighborhood to the point that Mr. Fortney opines that it will, authorizing it by special use permit. I do a lot of this kind of work, And so I don't pretend to know Mr. Fortney or your zoning, or everybody has their own, but each municipality has its own procedures and methods. for enforcing their special use permits and conditional use permits. And usually it's in the renewal process. And hey, we've been getting complaints about this. If you want to keep this permit, you better make these changes. You got all the authority in the world, even if Mr. Fortney's right. Comments?
All right, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Do we have anybody else?
Mr. Chair, I'm looking at the attendees right now. I don't see anyone else raising their hands at this point. So I'm not sure if there's anything different with Mr. Kisby, if he's able to speak or not, or if he has anything else to add to that. I could see him there, but
Yeah.
All right. So I think at this point, Mr. Chair, I will we'll have Mr. Thomas and Mr. Kisby exit the meeting unless you have any specific questions for them.
Okay, I got a message. Yeah, Dave says Lonnie covered it adequately. So Dave seems to be satisfied. Mr. Thomas has said his piece. So that's the
Hey,
extent.
Mitch,
Yes.
Mr. Commissioner, this is Lisa. Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Commissioner Siebenaler.
Okay,
I'm asking a question.
I hope I didn't.
Are you asking a question to the members of the public here?
To the, I'm sorry. Yeah, I should wait because I have a question for the property owner.
Okay. Mr. Chair, maybe what I suggest at this point would be to verify that there's not anyone else that would wish to speak to address the public hearing here. Maybe make one more call out at this point to see if anyone would like to. The way that you would do so would be to use the raise hand feature on Zoom, and then we can recognize you. And Mr. Chair, I don't see anything else at this time, so I could leave it to your discretion as to whether to close the public hearing.
I think that would be appropriate at this point, and we can certainly, Mr. Thomas and is it Dave Kisby? If you could kind of hang in the wings a little bit, we got questions for you. All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and close the public hearing then, and we'll leave it up to commissioners. Any thoughts, comments?
I do have a comment and a question.
Okay, Commissioner Siebenaler.
I just wanted to add that there's a neighbor about a block away down across from C's school that indicated they're in favor. Lucas Pop is in that house, but anyways, so they are in favor of it. I guess where they were coming from for the most part is that they felt it was better than what maybe some other possibilities are going in there. So that's kind of, they thought this is okay with them. So I just wanted to add that. And then I hope I didn't miss this, but has somebody approached the church to ask if they would be willing to continue use of their parking lot for excess parking, so that if there's not any off-street parking?
Justin, did state that did happen in an oral fashion, or was that coming from Mr. Thomas, or?
In a letter attached to the application, they had mentioned that they had a conversation with the church about that possibility. Lonnie Thomas this evening also mentioned that they had spoke verbally on it. It's been drafted yet, but they had a verbal agreement for that.
Thank you. That's all for me.
Our commissioners, thoughts?
Mr. Chairman,
Comments?
a couple quick thoughts on my side here. A couple of things that occurred to me here, in a little bit of agreement with Mr. Fortney's comments here about the fact that there is no secured parking at this point. I understand that they can make that agreement. However, that agreement, depending on how long that would be binding for, or if that agreement did fall through, there would not be enough parking on the facility to even cover all of their employees. I also do have a belief that based on the city code here, the ordinances and the general feel of the area, that this facility doesn't really meet the requirements of this. And I understand Mr. Thomas making his comments about what is allowed, including a funeral home, public library, and fire station. These things would be considered a city public welfare good, kind of a substantive thing, not commercial. And I do have a little bit of concern over the hours, because if you do have some people coming in and out at 11 o'clock at night, that it is a little bit later than normal. That might have been having some traffic. So I guess I just wanted to say my piece on that going forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else have some concerns? Well, nothing. Okay, well, should we roll this into a vote? Seems like that's where we're at. So we need to have a motion on the floor. How's that?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Halbert.
I'll make the motion to approve the special use permit.
Motion has been made. Is there a second? Seconded. Thank you. And
I do have a question before we take a roll call.
Further discussion?
Yeah, I do have a question about his motion. Is his motion to approve it based on the condition, those 10 conditions listed on the report? Because that wasn't part of his motion. I just want to make sure that motion includes those 10 conditions.
It would. I'm sorry. I should have been more specific, Gino. Thank you.
Oh, that's okay. I just want to make sure that when we vote, we're voting on a motion to approve with those 10 conditions listed.
Yep. Nope. Thank you.
All right, no problem.
And Commissioner Best, are you in agreement with that, with your second of the motion, that those be included?
I am, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, clarified first and second. Should we call some roll?
Okay, I can call the roll on this. Commissioner Hallberg? Romans?
No.
No. Commissioner Siebenaller? Aye. Commissioner Messina?
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Best?
Aye.
And Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Okay, I will note that the vote is 5 ayes, 1 nay to recommend approval of the special use permit. So this is an approval by the Planning Commission. This will be brought forward to the City Council meeting at the April 20th meeting with that recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, moving along, United Heroes League, number 4 on the Planning Commission agenda. Interim use permit 2020-17, construction of a challenge course and temporary parking lot at 2800 Ravenna Trail. We have a staff report by Justin Fortney.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. The Planning Commission is asked to make a recommendation to the City Council. The interim use permit would allow for temporary improvements that do not meet the city development standards for a period of time outside the MUSA, which is the Metropolitan Urban Service Area. This would allow for temporary operations to begin or an operation with minimal upfront investment. The approval permit would be probational for the first 6 months and possibly reauthorized by the City Council. The 18-month period, the improvements must be removed or brought up to full development standards following an approved site plan. The applicant is proposing to construct a confidence course, also known as an obstacle course, at the property. They're proposing to receive an interim use permit approval to temporarily allow gravel parking lot, a small dumpster, porta potties, and they propose to construct the necessary pavement and landscaping at the end of the interim use permit. Lighting is proposed during the interim use permit timeline. The applicant's rationale for the interim use permit is over budgetary concerns and constraints. As a cost-conscious nonprofit that prides itself on a very high charitable giving percentage, they need to demonstrate interest in usage of the course before allocating donor dollars to substantially improve the area. Additionally, they're launching springboard revenue to create those improvements. The temporary improvements would not negatively affect the area. Staff's review, there's very few neighbors. The site was formerly used as sand and gravel mine, and it would be open to appointment and gated for security. The concept plan shows many uses that are not part of this application and have not been reviewed for compliance with current city codes. The applicant has stated that the shooting range located in the Ravenna Township part of the property has been removed from their future plans. Staff notified property owners within 350 feet of the special use permit site, and no comments have been received. There were 2 neighbors that called to confirm that the gun range was not being proposed as part of the current proposal. The gravel parking lot would contain 40 to 50 spaces, and the applicant anticipates between 10 and 20 vehicles per event, generally. And this would occur twice per month between May and October. Is one of the items that's not required during the review of the interim, as an improvement for the interim use permit. No site lighting is proposed during this time. Staff would recommend approval of the permit subject to the conditions in the staff report. And I can switch over to share some photos of the area. View of the property. The parcel that contains these improvements is outlined in orange, although the applicant owns a lot more property off to the east. And you're probably aware of the location of Extreme Sandbox to the west, which is located just on the corner. They also received an interim use permit when they first began for their first 18 months. Picture of the current entrance. This would be where the proposed entrance would be, and it would go straight ahead, and it would again be gravel for the interim use. I mentioned that there would be a gate closing off. This is a aerial view and a concept plan from the applicant that showed of the entrance would be over here on the right side of the screen and would come in, and then there would be a large gravel parking lot, and then this number 1 is the location of the the only part of this plan that's being reviewed this time. Some general types of items you would find in this type of a course. A lot of climbing structures and other types of obstacles. General information. Staff can stand for any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Fortney at this point? We do have a public hearing we need to follow up with, but go ahead.
Oh, go ahead with public meeting. Or, yeah.
So no questions for Mr. Fortney at this time?
Is that
Chair,
for commission members?
Yes, for the commission members. Any questions for Mr. Fortney? It sounds like, Lisa, you have a question.
Yeah, I'm curious, where is the Ravenna Township portion of the orange outlined lot?
Um, the orange outlined lot is entirely within the city limits.
Okay.
I'll show you on the aerial photograph. The area that's in the township would be off the screen here. All within the city limits.
Okay, thank you.
Albert?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Justin, when they say they'll have it gated off, is that just the entrance or the entire facility fenced in? Because it'd be all fine and good to block off the entrance, but if you can just walk in and use the ropes course at your own position, what's the point of having a gate there?
I'm not aware of any fencing that's proposed. I don't know if they are anticipating that or not. I think the comment about the gate was just at the gate keeping vehicles from coming into that area. That is going to be pretty far back from the road. You couldn't drive there. You'd have to park probably on a street somewhere and walk pretty far in. But there's currently not any fencing there, and I'm not sure if they would be placing any in. It'd be a very large area to fence in.
Thank you. Chair.
You know, I got a quick question too, maybe for you, Mr. Fortney. The 6 months with the 1 year follow-up, so this 18-month period, can you talk a little bit more about how that's structured? We would be approving a 6-month interim use, and then what happens?
The Planning Commission would be making a recommendation to City Council that their proposal is appropriate, and there would be a 6-month period of time where they would go ahead and do their use. And after 6 months, it would go back to the City Council and just to determine if there was any issues during that time. If there was really no issues, then they would give the approval for the 1 year time period.
And at this point, it's still interim, so it would be, nothing would change as far as improvements on the site.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Any other quick questions before we check out our public?
You have a question.
Commissioner Siebenholt.
Does city staff recall the very far end of this lot? Was that a dump site for the bridge demolition?
Yes, the whole center of this site, including where this orange parcel is, had a lot of concrete rubble from that bridge and 61 street reconstruction project that mostly been ground up and removed from the site.
So is the mounds of off to the south of the ground up bridge remains?
Please switch back to the aerial photograph and see if we can see that area. Yeah, it looks like it's mostly gone, even in this aerial picture. It was kind of along this area here in the center. These are some remnant piles of the concrete that was ground up.
Or is anyone aware? Is any of that any kind of a hazmat material?
To my knowledge, there was no hazardous materials mixed in with any of that concrete.
Thank you. One thing I was wondering is, because it's going to be used that I think of a little bit as like almost like a park, you know, nothing is built on the land. Are environmental studies necessary, or is there any, the city, or is that just solely the property owner's responsibility to be sure that it's not, there's nothing contaminated to protect people that are actually participating?
The city doesn't have any requirements for testing of the site.
I'm also wondering with the parking, it says the gravel lot would contain 40 to 50 spaces, but they only need 10 to 20. Double the spaces needed.
I believe it's because they're not exactly sure what the need would be. So with a with a gravel parking lot, excuse me, it'd be very easy just to make it be a little bit larger than necessary. They would have a use for the gravel in construction of the permanent improvements. And I believe they probably already have gravel on that site. That's what most of the site contained.
Yeah, it did look like some kind of it wasn't all muddy and wet, so it appeared like it had some kind of a surface cover on it already.
Okay, should we, John, do we have some public interested? Should we open the meeting?
Sure, Mr. Chair, if you open the public hearing, I'm looking at the attendees as we speak here. I don't see anyone indicating a desire to speak. Again, if you'd like to address the Planning Commission during the public hearing, please use the raised hand function on Zoom. We've got.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We'll open the public hearing and see if we have some people interested in talking. I'm going to open up public hearing on the interim use permit. Ravenna Trail. You got their hand up?
Mr. Chair, I see no indication at this point. We have 4 members in the audience right now, besides Commissioner Siebenauer.
Count down. Okay, I'm done counting down. Close the public hearing. And commissioners, we've already had a few questions bounce around. Any other thoughts or concerns?
I have one question that I missed.
Commissioner Siebenauer, go ahead.
I was, I guess I'm under the understanding that property owners within 350 feet were notified, but in a very rural, spread out area, were all of the adjacent landowners given notice, even if adjacent is what I'm trying to get at, so that any property that butts up against this property that is more than 350 feet away, were they notified?
Hinsman or Fortney?
I can answer that. Property owners within 350 feet of that large orange parcel were notified. So that would definitely include any adjacent property owner.
Okay, so it's that, okay, it goes that, okay. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Just to clarify that the 350 starts at the orange boundary, not the site itself. So all adjacent property owners notified.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Best.
I have the same concerns that Commissioner Hallberg had. I understand the gated entrance part, but being able to fence it in, I worry about any criminal activity, any liabilities if somebody does get onto the course and happens to injure themselves, what kind of security they would be able to provide there. And if something were to be, somebody was using it outside of operational hours, how would they be going about getting it fixed and whatnot? So I guess I would like to know if they'd be able to do some sort of fencing, because even if the structures are all built further back from the road, that won't stop somebody from wanting to go back there still and trying to get on the course. So I just wanted to say that my concerns are just about the fencing and the security of the area.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Messina.
Yeah, I was on the commission when we approved the interim use permit for Extreme Sandbox, which is their neighbor. They don't have fencing around their area either. And that was some of our concerns that we brought up at the same time was security. To the best of my knowledge, they've had very few, if any, incidents there. Because of the location of the property being out in basically virtually in the middle of nowhere, there's really nowhere to park your vehicle in order for you to walk in and do anything nefarious. It's just not possible. And if they gate off the lot, that'll take care of cars entering the property. And I do know that business, I don't know who researched it, I did. And they're amazing nonprofit. They're going to be an excellent community partner. I have a feeling that this isn't their first obstacle course they've built. So they probably have security and safety in mind. Yes, a fence would be ideal, but you can't fence everything in, unfortunately. But, you know, and if somebody wants to get onto a piece of property bad enough, they'll find a way. So, yeah. But we did approve, this follows the extreme sandbox model almost identically, and we see what a success that was. So, just food for thought on that. I was on that same commission back then when we approved it. So it's a great fit for that particular piece of property. So that's it. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Messina. Commissioners? More thoughts? I would entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the recommendations, adding that paragraph, the second paragraph, page 1 of our of our packet, with the approved permit would be probational for the first 6 months, and then possibly, I feel like it's necessary for that to be part of it. Am I thinking logically there? Any opinions?
If you look at the recommended actions items on the last page of the staff report, number 3 is 6-month probationary, right?
Right, but it doesn't elaborate on the 18 months. It doesn't say anything about the 18 months.
I follow
So the
you.
12 isn't.
Is that kind of standard procedure, Mr. Fortney, or is that
The 6-month probationary period followed by 1 year is 18 months, and that's actually part of the ordinance itself. That's not a condition we were adding on. That is just the way the ordinance operates.
okay?
Oh, thank you. I'll motion to approve as it stands underneath under the recommended action for the interim use permit, 2800 Ravenna Trail.
You have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Commissioner
There you
Messina, sorry.
And any further discussion? Mr. Hinsman, can I get you to call roll?
Sure, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Best? Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Romans?
Aye.
Messina?
Aye.
Commissioner Hallberg?
Aye.
Commissioner Siebenhaler?
Aye.
I will note that there are 6 ayes. Recommendation for approval will be passed forward to the City Council for their consideration at April 20th meeting.
Okay, moving on. Item number 5 on the agenda, Wallen Partnership Final Plat 2020-16 Wallen 18th Edition. General Sieben Drive and River Shore Drive. Staff report, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Planning Commissioners. I'm going to put my screen on to share so we can take a look at the property that we'll be discussing here. And I think I've got that. I just have you all on it. There we go. So we've got before us tonight is a final plat approval for Wallen 18th Edition. Wallen 18th is noted in the area in the orange here. It's located on General Sieben Drive, River Shore Drive, and then Woodcliff Trail. The property itself, you may recall, was the subject of a similar, not a similar, but a request in 2018 for a similarly named plat. This plat that we looked at in 2018 were villa homes along this cul-de-sac up here. The situation with that was a preliminary plat and final plat request. When we're looking at preliminary plats and final plats, really what's the difference between them? A preliminary plat actually is more intensive than a final plat. This takes a look at all the engineering approvals, all the utility approvals, and sets it up so when a property is ready to be officially subdivided, it goes through a final plat. When we're looking at a final plat, what we're looking at is conformance to the preliminary plat. Done all the preliminary engineering work. That has been done. It's been reviewed by our engineering staff. During a final plat, what we're doing is a couple of things. A, is this in conformance with the preliminary plat? And B, what sort of other conditions for approval might there be in payments of fees? And so that's what we're looking at. We had this proposal before us last year for villa homes. The villa homes were not contemplated as far as the Wallen development went. So this was a change. So we were looking at a new preliminary plat and final plat. As you probably recall at the time, this was something that was denied by the city council. Forward tonight, that's not part of it. What we're looking at is a plan that is consistent with the preliminary plat. What I'm showing on my screen here is the preliminary plat approval from 2002. The area in red here is highlighted to be the area within Wallen 18th edition. The number of lots located here, which are 11, and the sizes of those lots and the configuration of the property boundaries is identical to the 2002 approval. And so we are recommending approval of that. The proposal does include this area here along Brandlewood Court and what's termed as an outlot, which means it'll be reserved for future development. What that development would be in the future, we do not know. It could be done as a final plat consistent with the plan here and brought forward, or potentially the owner could modify that in some other fashion, but that's not before us tonight. Looking at is the final plat approval, which is consistent with the preliminary plat. So other things that we look at here: grading and drainage and erosion control plan, identical to 2002, approvaling of that. The tree plan, utilities, the park dedication, and sewer interceptor fees were all paid at that time of the 2002 preliminary plat. So we are recommending approval of this with only one condition, and that is it be in conformance with the preliminary plat and the master development agreement from 2002. So that's what I have before you tonight related to the Wallen development here. I believe Todd Rapp, the attorney representing the Wallen development, is in the audience if you have any questions for him. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hinsman.
And Mr. Chair, I think Mr. Rapp has raised his hand, so if you wish to hear a statement from him, I could bring him into the meeting at this time as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, let me do that. And he should be coming in here shortly. See him down there. I'm going to mute your microphone, Todd, or attempt to do so. So I see him in the meeting right now, and microphone is muted. I'm making attempts. Dan's probably making attempts as well to, oh, I think it's unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Thank you, Mr. Rapp.
Okay. Mr. Johnson and other members of the Planning Commission. I'm Todd Rapp. Some of you may remember I've been the legal counsel for the Wallen Limited Liability Partnership for a long time. I'm just here if you have any questions about the proposed final plat for the 18th edition. John has done exactly what I would have done in his exposition of it, because it is consistent with the still applicable 2002 Master Development Agreement. That's the way we put it together, and it will be completed in complete conformity with that 2002 approved preliminary plat. So if you have any questions, ring my bell. Otherwise, I'll sit back and listen to your discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Commissioners. Anybody have some thoughts or concerns or questions for the developer?
I've got a question.
Commissioner Stephenhour, go ahead.
I'm wondering if it's been explored to try to eliminate the entrance on General Sieben to one of the off streets. I know in the past that's been a concern. Of course, the last time there were many more driveways. But now, if I'm looking at this correctly, we've got the court entrance from General Sieben, and then lots 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're going to have 5 entrances or 5 different coming in and out and etc. Keeping driveways clear in the winter, coming out onto General Sieben Drive. Just want to get some background of how you're working through some of that.
Am I still mic'd up? Okay. Commissioner Stephenhour, that was a topic of discussion back in the timeframe of 2002 when the Master Development Agreement was negotiated between myself, representatives of the partnership, Tom Montgomery, and your former city administrator. The resulting approval that we received, contemplating that one driveway of these 4 that are being final proposed on 18th edition, moved around the corner so that it unloads onto Northridge Drive. No, River Shore Drive, excuse me. Other 3, and John and I had a back and forth over this as one of the conditions for approval of this final plat. Each one of the remaining 3 lots that are being proposed for final plat will have like hammerhead turnarounds that will be required to be constructed with the building permit as a condition of issuing building permits to those. So the resolution that was discussed way back when was that at least we get that traffic turned around and pointed out so that people aren't backing out onto General Sieben Drive. Unlike the prior proposal from last year for a home type of product, I don't anticipate there's going to be any snow pushed out into the street. I don't anticipate that. The final point in response to your comment, the SAC area was platted and shown on John's page with the pink area and marked as the approved preliminary plat. That's not being subdivided at this time. There will be ultimately a total, 9 lots on that. The Brandlewood Court, John?
That is correct.
Brandlewood Court, but none of those are being programmed for construction at this time. Be a fully municipal city street, just like the other 2, Delwood Court and the Cobblestone Court up the street. We have addressed the issue of access onto General Sieben Drive as best we could in a compromised fashion long ago with these turnaround driveway configurations. And thank you for your question.
Thank you for your answer.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing you say is, okay, so help me understand why Brandlewood Court even has to be there if none of those lots will be built on.
Brandlewood Court was final platted a few subdivisions back, as I recall. And so the area that's proposed as an outlot here simply rings around the existing platted, but as yet unapproved Brandlewood Court. And the only reason that we're not doing the final plat of the 9 preliminarily platted lots on Brandlewood is market conditions. We don't need that inventory at the present time.
So eventually that will be developed, very likely.
Well, almost certainly, but the time frame for it is uncertain at the present time.
So there will be 4 driveways attached to General Stephen, right, all right in a row.
Formally speaking, there'll be 3 driveways, the 3 that we're putting in connection with this current plat, all of which will have turnarounds. A public street which already exists,
Court.
Brandwood Court.
So lot number 1 will be able to access from Brandlewood?
No, on this proposed plat, lot 1, block 1 will be taking its access egress onto General Stephen Drive, as will lots 2 and 3. Access for lot 4 will be turned around to the south onto River Shore Drive. This plat,
Okay, thank you.
3 driveways.
Thank you.
And any other questions?
So I got a question for John. John, what do you think of having 3 driveways coming out on a General Stephen? I know that we were trying to avoid things like that, because of the fact that it's such a main trunk. And what I'm concerned about is setting precedents for across the street when they go to develop over there. Are they going to say, well, look at they just got this approved. Why can't we have it approved to have some more driveways come out onto General Stephen on the other side?
Commissioner Stephen Aller, can we hold off on that till we get through with the
Sure.
public hearing?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Just to respect anybody else out there that wants to come forth. It's time for that. Do we have any other hands, John?
You formally opened the public hearing yet? Haven't.
Just a point of clarification. This wouldn't technically be a public hearing, but the commission
Right.
would like to entertain any comments. We can ask anybody in the audience if they would wish to speak.
I totally stand corrected. Maybe we want to talk about the driveways. I know the last time we saw this, concern about trash pickup, snow removal. In my mind, I see pretty good concessions here made to accommodate these properties in this proposed plat. You got lot 4 going off the south, limited to 3 driveways plus the road in the future. And I don't know if, is there an issue with precedent here, as Commissioner Siebenaler brought up, that property across the street develops and they're going to want 3 more, and here we go, you know?
Chair and commissioners, when we're looking at a final plat, what we're doing is we're looking at conformity with the preliminary plat. At the preliminary plat level in 2002, we reviewed these types of issues. And we made a decision at that point with the approval of the preliminary plat that this was something that we could live with. We take a look at the code itself. It's something that they're strongly discouraged for not occurring on a collector road. And if there is, there's certain provisions. So we work best that we can through the preliminary plat process to not have driveways access a road. In this situation here, we made a decision that yes, this is something that could happen. And so when a final plat comes forward, we're obligated to honor those prior decisions on it. As far as how this may affect future decisions, I don't think it has bearing on it. Any other development of property on the other side of the road would go through a preliminary plat in which the question would be looked at as to whether driveways could front a General Stephen Drive. From a staffing standpoint, we would discourage that and do all we could to prevent that from occurring. Perhaps there may be a situation that could come up.
Perfect. Any other concerns here?
John, when you said that, when you mentioned that in the past it was agreed upon, what exactly was agreed upon? Was it a number of driveways accessing, or what is it that you feel the city needs to abide by because it's been agreed to in the past?
Commissioner, with the approval, the resolution approval, and the master development agreement, which we entered into with the property owners, the preliminary plat approval showed the layout of all the lots here. I'm going to put that screen share back up again here. So what we're looking at here is all, are you seeing the screen here?
Oh, I'm on the telephone, but I'm looking at what we were given in our packets.
Okay, I forgot about that. For everybody else out there, what I'm showing here is the preliminary plat. This was everything that was approved, or a portion of that in 2002, the whole layout. So we looked at the engineering, the street layout, the utilities of this whole area here, and gave approvals to that. With the final plat, it's the official subdivision of the properties here in the red into final lots. So when we looked at this in 2002, we looked at the creation of these lots along General Sieben Drive and agreed that they could move forward, provided that they met the hammerhead turnaround and the setback provisions.
Okay, so what was agreed upon is that it would be perfectly fine to have 4 additional accesses to General Sieben from this section, Brandlewood, and the 3 driveways.
Commissioner, yes. I mean, actually 3, because there's a corner lot on the corner of River Shore and General Sieben Drive.
Sure.
Their access would not be on General Sieben. But for the other 3 lots with the plans that were approved, yes, they were approved with that access to General Sieben Drive.
Oh, so Brandlewood, okay, so Brandlewood and the 3 driveways would be 4 that are already approved and are not going away. But I mean, have been agreed upon, so that stays the way it is.
That is correct. So when we give a preliminary plat approval, we're stating you can move forward with a final plat at some point in the future, provided that it meets the requirements of what we approved in the preliminary plat.
Okay, thank you. That the lot from lot 15, I'm looking at the preliminary plat right now, and it's labeled number 15 on the corner. The one across the street that's labeled number 1, and that would be an access onto River Shore.
That would be correct there. Yeah, that's outside of this preliminary, or excuse me, this final plat. But yes, that one I think as well would be off of River Shore Drive, that other corner lot.
Thank you for helping me.
Anything else, commissioners? Are we good? Should we make, entertain a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Oh, well, I'll finish it up here. I'll make a motion to approve. No, it's okay. I'll make a motion to approve the Wallen final plat, 2020-16 Wallen 18th edition, subject to that condition that's listed on that final paragraph. Conformance with the approved preliminary plat and master development agreement as approved by the City Council on July 8, 2002 as amended.
Excellent. Seconded by Romans.
I'll second.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, should we call roll, John?
Did Commissioner Siebeneller have a
situation? All that will remain the same, correct? That the turnarounds will be there. That doesn't have.
Commissioner, I think what I heard you say is that the approval would include the turnarounds on General Sieben Drive. Is that what you're stating? Oops, shoot, I think we just lost her for some reason.
Yep, I see that.
Yeah, so.
In the interim, I might just comment. So the Brandlewood Court and what I heard was maybe 9 lots potentially.
Yeah, I think that's what I see here, about 9 or 10 lots. Yeah, so that was preliminary platted out in 2002, and it could come back with a similar application to subdivide those to create those lots. Yes,
correct. And that's in the future. That's not part of what we're looking at here tonight.
Right, yeah, not what we're looking at tonight. What they have is this outlot, which is created. An outlot is essentially kind of a placeholder.
Yep.
It doesn't confer any really development rights on it. It's just a way to keep property together for future subdivision.
All right. Have we located Commissioner Siebenauer yet?
I have not. I don't see her on here, and I don't see any message from her as well via text. So I'm unclear of the whereabouts of Commissioner Siebenauer at this point. So,
Well, I think we should go ahead and call roll. If she procedurally, does that seem reasonable?
procedurally, Mr. Chair, I believe that's reasonable on here. If Commissioner Siebenauer has, we've noted her comments for the record. If there's other things that she may wish to share with the City Council, we can pass those along as well. So we do have a quorum, so we can move forward with that if you choose.
Correct. Why don't you go ahead and call roll then?
Okay, Commissioner Hallberg.
Aye.
Commissioner Messina.
Aye.
Commissioner Best.
Aye.
Homans.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Okay. I think I see Commissioner Siebenauer's phone back under. Commissioner Siebenauer, can you hear us? Okay. I'm going in a roll call vote right now on a recommendation for approval. Would you like it to cast a vote?
I've lost, I missed everything that was said. I got disconnected or something because I didn't hear anything about the motion. Nobody seconding it. I just want to be clear on what the motion is.
The motion was made by Commissioner Messina to approve, including the city recommendations. That would include the Hammerhead driveway accesses on those 3 lots, as we've discussed. Seconded by Commissioner Romans. We've all
Okay.
voted. We've all voted aye, and it's you're the last vote.
I'm an aye.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair. Note that the roll reflects 6 ayes, no nays, and the recommendation of approval of the plat. This will move forward for final action to the City Council on April 20th.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Rapp.
Good evening.
All right. So next item on the agenda, item 6, we're looking at Ian Martin variance 2020-18, side yard setback deck, 1770 Greystone Road. Asked to review and make a recommendation to City Council on an action requested by Ian Martin on the very same property. Staff report, John?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and Planning Commissioners. Putting up on my screen here, not the map of the property, that's the last one. I'll move this forward here. Okay, the property that we're considering tonight in the variance request, as you noted, 1770 Greystone Road is the location we're looking at. The request before us is to make a recommendation on a variance request for construction of a deck, which is essentially located towards the east end of the property where the arrow is here at 1770 Greystone Road. For an ordinance requirement is a 5-foot setback requirement for accessory structures and decks between their placement and the side property line. Mr. Martin is requesting tonight is to a 5-foot variance to that 5-foot provision, which would essentially place the deck on the property line as shown here. On the project, in September of 2019, Mr. Martin submitted a building permit application to construct the subject deck. The permit permission to construct the deck was a 12-foot by a 24-foot deck, a little bit larger than is requested today on the eastern side of his home. And I'll make note, this is the location and this is the building permit here that was submitted in 2019. During review of that permit, Mr. Martin was notified that the permit could not be issued due to the following. 1, the deck would be within 5 feet of the minimum setback, we do have a 5-foot requirement, and as the deck would be shown here, we've got a 12-foot setback between the home property line. So a 12-foot deck would go up to the property line to the east here. So there was a zoning requirement of a 5-foot setback and a requirement that structures are not placed within the 5-foot drainage and utility easement. The drainage and utility easement is a perimeter around the property, can barely be shown here, but it's essentially a 5-foot area towards the eastern end of the property. So both those bits of information were shared with Mr. Martin at that time. So I've discussed options with him to allow construction of the deck, which would include either reducing the size of the deck to meet requirements. So he would need to reduce the deck itself to no more than 7 feet in width in order to meet that 5-foot requirement, or to request a variance and to the zoning code to allow its construction. Mr. Martin asked if a variance to the side yard setback could be considered. We told him, yeah, it could be. Upon our review with staff, we did not feel that this would meet the ordinance requirements, and that a recommendation for denial of the variance was likely. So this all happened during the fall of 2019. At some point, Mr. Martin proceeded to construct the deck without securing a building permit or other city approvals. On 31st, the Hastings Building Department issued a stop work order on the property for construction of the deck for failure to secure approvals. At that time, as noted in your packet, the deck footings, the structural members had been installed at the time of that stop work order. April 1st, I was contacted by Mr. Martin, and he submitted a land use application for the variance that's before us tonight. So what we're asking you to consider tonight is that variance request. You take a look at the property itself, it's zoned R1, decks are allowed certainly. Everything around it right here is zone R1 as well. Single family development surrounding the property, albeit some of it has not been developed at this point. And then there is a ponding basin located just directly to the east of the property as well. So when we take a look at variances, we're looking at a couple of things. Variances by definition are deviations from the strict compliance of the code. Adjustment of an appeals is the body that issues the variance. The city council serves as that board. Also within city code, it gives the review authority and recommendation authority by the planning commission to review whether a variance should be granted or not. So that's why this is before you tonight here. So within the zoning code, or within the city code, I should say, there's certain requirements that variances need to meet. And so within your report itself, I laid out the different criteria that variances must meet in order for them to be considered for approval. I'll go through a summary of some of those provisions. One of them is because the physical surroundings, shape of the property results in what's termed a practical difficulty. I'll get into more practical difficulty in a moment here. Essentially, there's something peculiar about this lot, something different about the lot. Look at the lot and its creation and the other lots within the Wallen subdivision, it's pretty similar. It is adjacent to a pond, but there's also 14 other lots adjacent to this pond here and lots adjacent to ponds throughout the city. So from a physical standpoint, I don't see anything necessarily peculiar about the property there. Conditions upon which the petition of the variance is based are unique. I don't see anything that's particularly unique on this property here. Granting the variance would allow construction of the deck within the publicly dedicated drainage and utility easement. That's the concern that we have as well, is we have setback provisions for certain reasons. One is to provide setback, obviously, from adjoining properties. Another one is to ensure that the utility easements itself, which we have established the possibility of being used in the future for the benefit of the city. A deck completely into this easement and up to the property line, it would negate the ability for that to be used in the future. Do we have anything in there right now? I don't think that we do, but the reason that we set those up is for the long term. There may be a point in the future in which that is something that is desired. And so that's the reason why those are established upon the properties itself. So look at that practical hardship provision itself. Really a key element in whether we should consider the granting of a variance itself. In the code, it says practical hardships, practical difficulties used in connection with granting of the variance. They must meet a couple of requirements. One, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner, not permitted in official control. Certainly, construction of a deck is reasonable. Reasonable in this situation is how the practical difficulty was created. It says that the practical difficulty is caused by persons presently or formerly having an interest in the parcel of the land. In this case, that is the case. The house itself was permit were applied for by Mr. Martin. The choice of where the building would go on the property was that of Mr. Martin. The creation of a building in which the deck door itself was in very close proximity was that of his as well. The variance situation is self-created. The property itself could have been designed in a different manner to provide for the enjoyment of the pond in which he seeks. And so we don't think that practical difficulty is there. When we look at practical difficulties, we're taking a look at how something is differentiated. Anytime that we make an action related to a variance, precedent is set for how that action could be used by other properties within the city. When you're looking at that practical difficulty, you're looking at something in which not differentiate it or distinguish it specifically to a property as to why you're granting a variance. You can confer the rights of that variance to other properties. In this case, if nothing particular or nothing specific is given as to why here, it could be used in other places. And we look at as practical use as well. What practical use and enjoyment is allowed within the code in the current situation? Now I'm going to flip around to some of the pictures that are shown here. You can see the deck under construction here. You can see that the property line is somewhere where I am pointing about seven feet back from the house itself. Build conceivably a 7-foot deck out there. Granted, it's not a very wide deck. One could question the usability of it, but the ability is there to do it. Possibility that could be created on this would be to 7-foot deck out here and potentially wrap it around the house here. The pond itself is in this location. This area here is free of easement, and within the setback provisions, it would still provide enjoyment of the pond that Mr. Martin seeks on this. So one of the other things we look at in granting a variance is what possibilities are on the property for the use of it. Are there other methods in which it could be constructed? I would answer yes on this question. There are other ways in which it could be used. Is it the way that's preferable to Mr. Martin? I would guess that he would say no. But I do believe that there are methods in which the property could be used, a deck could be constructed down there that would meet our requirements. So we are recommending denial of the variance request based upon that information. Stop sharing my screen here. I believe Mr. Martin is in the audience here, and he may want to address the commission as well. He also had submitted a letter in support of this. I will also note as well, we did send notification of the variance request out to properties within 350 feet. We did receive 2 responses. One was a response from 1671 Fallbrook Drive, Jill and Andy Gents, who were supportive of the variance. They live kind of across the pond from Mr. Martin. I also received some comments from the owner of the pond, which is the Wallen subdivision, who had questions about allowing a variance that would be in close proximity to their property. So at this point, I can stand for any questions, and I'm looking in the audience right now, and I thought Mr. Martin was there momentarily ago, but I don't see him there present. Oh, he's in the meeting. Never mind. Got it. Mitch, you're muted, Chairman. Okay, Mr. Chair, you are muted, or you are muted. There you are.
So complicated. Okay. Mr. Martin, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
We can indeed.
All right.
Would you like to make a statement?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I could speak to that. First off, I'd like the record to reflect that it's actually a 3-foot variance, not a 5-foot variance, as the staff report notates. The deck piers are 10 feet out from the house, and that would constitute a 3-foot encroachment into the easement, not a 5-foot encroachment into the easement, as the staff report notates. Actual basis for that, back September 4th, 2018, we had a similar variance request with a garage, 414 West 5th Street. Similar question was brought up there with a soffit overhanging the wall that was into the ground. And this is much the same situation here, where the deck physically sits 3 feet into the easement and not 5 feet, as the report would indicate. Number two, if you guys go to the staff report, unique conditions, John mentions 14 lots around the pond. I would counter that and say there are hundreds of R1 zoned plats around the city that don't surround a pond, where this particular issue would be far more invasive if there was a home next to me from the east. There isn't in this case. Going down to number 4 in the staff report, this contradicts a license to encroach that was recorded on our property October 8th, 2019. The city approved our site plan and building review. We have egress window wells in our basement. Those window wells, where the house sits on the building pad, encroach into the same drainage and utility easement. The pictures that I took that are attached to your report point that out. There's a license to encroach that was already granted because of those window wells and that landscaping. And as you can see in those photos, there's plenty of access to the pond between the deck and the water's edge if need be. I've been here now for 2.5 years. I've seen how high that pond can get, and there's still plenty of space in between where the water has been. Number 6 in that staff report, I would again point out, is factually incorrect. The variance is 3 feet, as indicated by the neighborhood notification letter that went out to the neighbors here within the 350-foot radius. Number 8, factually incorrect. It's not on the property line, and I would say a deck is a very reasonable use. We go down to number 9. A, factually incorrect. It's not on the property line. When you get to B, say the city is ultimately the one that would be responsible for how it sits on a building pad. I, as a homeowner, don't have the ability to say, I want my house to sit here, or I want it to sit there. The encroachment issues with those window wells on the east side of the home were never brought to our attention until the final grade review. We would have been open to change had they been brought to our attention. John points out that the deck could feasibly be 7 feet wide on the east side and wrap around the north side of the home. If you look at our survey there, you'll see an egress window well northeast corner of our home. Essentially, the way our house is built right now, patio door to the east, and a egress window well directly on that northeast corner. So there is absolutely no way we could construct a deck or an egress window well with a bedroom in our basement would be essentially below that deck if that's where we were to put it. So, nutshell, we got painted into a corner. There's no way to build a deck on the north side of the home, and a 7-foot deck John mentioned, and I think most people would see as reasonable. Feet is not reasonable. I mean, you can't put a table out there, let alone a couple of chairs. So the support I've heard around the neighborhood is all positive. It fits in, it's cohesive. All the homes around the pond have decks on them. It's not inhibiting anyone's sight lines, affecting value, things like that. Still access under it, around it. It's not affecting drainage at all. And just to note, there are no utilities on that side of the home. They're all along the and then the west side of the home. There is nothing that runs along that pond. If there's any questions, I'd be willing to answer them. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Yeah, and if you want to just
I have
hang
a
the
que-
wings if we've got questions. Commissioners,
Question for Ian.
Mr. Commissioner Siebenauer. Why don't you go ahead?
Ian, thank you. Do you mow into the grass?
Could you repeat that? I couldn't hear you there really that well.
The question.
Sure.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, you can go, Mitch, just to be sure he can hear.
Well, yeah. I'll just rephrase it. Commissioner Siebenauer was asking if you mowed into the buffer grass, and I guess that would maybe imply past your lot line. I guess.
So when the work was done, there were some grading issues with the initial construction of the home. There was some work that was done in the yard. They had to go essentially outside of the property to build those walls and things. It looks like dirt now. You know, I maintain it. I take the weeds out of there and whatnot, so my dogs aren't getting full of buckthorn and things. If that answers your question.
So essentially, you're basically caring for that slope that is really off your property line there.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think that answers the question.
Yeah, I guess when I think of a drainage pond like this, part of the drainage is the buffer. Because, you know, it's the infiltration, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, John or somebody might know more about this than me, but I think the buffer is just about as important as the base, you know, just as much of a part of the basin as the basin itself.
Yeah, and I would say nothing variance is concerned with enters that area. All that is in the ground are the deck piers themselves. Everything else is built above the ground.
Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Romans.
Couple things. One question for John. Can you clarify the statements about the 3 feet versus 5 foot difference? Where the difference in opinion is coming from?
Commissioner Romans, was referring to a variance that was granted a couple years ago, 414 West 5th Street, where the variance was from the foundation of the building, but there was a soffit overhang, which was, maybe 6 inches to a foot looking at the photos of that one. So we took it from the foundation itself. A clearance there of 10 feet or so between the ground level and the top of it. When you take a look at the deck here, it's much less. When you put that deck out towards the property line, whether it's on the property line or inches from it, essentially makes that easement unusable for the future. I mean, that deck is not that far off of the ground itself. So, I mean, I see his argument on that one. I would counter that in a situation like this, you do not have access, full access at ground level because of the height of the deck. And I would still counter that with whether it's a 3-foot variance, whether it's a 2-foot variance or a 5-foot variance, it's a variance being asked with the lack of a hardship. Mr. Martin has failed to identify what that hardship would be in staff's opinion.
Okay, that makes sense. And I understand the difference between the soffit and a deck. The soffit is not intruding upon anything. A deck is a bit more of a structure in this case.
Yeah. And I will make a clarification to a statement that Mr. Martin made before relating to the license to encroach. Mr. Martin is correct that a license to encroach was granted in 2019 for work that had occurred within the easement area, pertaining to a retaining wall and some landscape, which are shown on the pictures there. Very clear within the license to encroach that no other structure shall encroach within that easement area, within the staff report and within the agreement itself.
That clarifies a few things here. I guess I understand here a little bit of the hardship area of, I get that he's kind of going to catch 22 here, but I agree with the sense that not really in a unreasonable hardship because of this, and little disappointed in the fact that the deck was constructed, at least starting construction before any of this was cleared before us. And I don't like that precedent being set general either. It disturbs me a little bit, and I guess that's uncomfortable place to be in this way, where somebody knew what was going on here and chose to go other ways going forward. So there's a little bit of my 2 cents. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Romans.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Martin.
Sure. I guess just to sum it up in a nutshell, the hardship and really it's not much a hardship anymore. It's a practical difficulty, a unique practical difficulty. The practical difficulty that I would argue in this case is that had we been told the patio door has been there since day one, the ledger board was there since day one, it was called out on our building plans. Someone said, during that site plan review, the building plan review, your deck can only be 7 feet wide. We would have, reconfigured our kitchen, put that patio door on the north side, put our egress window well on the east side, had our deck on the north side, things would have been fine. The way we are right now, I cannot construct a deck at all on my house. I can't, like I said, put a deck over an egress window well. That doesn't meet code. You need to have an exit out of that basement bedroom, should the case arise. We would have been willing to, work something out. That was never brought to our attention. So do is improve our property. The deck is not of a size that is outside of the bounds of the neighborhood. I think there were 3 neighbors that said they were sending in letters of support. and that license to encroach, and out that this deck sits closer to the house than what retaining walls and consequent landscaping do. And that was brought on by the city, not by us. The license to encroach had to be granted because of the egress window well pit requirements for the size.
Mr. Martin, let me clarify a couple of things on that issue from what I understand. What I understand on the need for the egress window was a change to the plans that we didn't note until on site. And I may pause to say that I don't even know if it was a change in the plans. When we had plans that were approved, we did not have an egress window. We went forward on the site, there magically appeared an egress window. Engineering staff at that time had a decision to make as to whether we were to take a position and say, okay, get rid of the egress window. It wasn't on the plans. We took what we thought was the reasonable position at that standpoint and say, well, they weren't on the plans. What can we do with this? And so that's when the grading came into place with the license to encroach itself. I believe that was a situation in which it was noted that activities occurred within the easement. I don't believe that the city was given any notice of that. That just occurred within there. And in order to provide some ability for use of that property after the fact, a license to encroach was done on the property. There's also been issues of the use of that property, and in particular the drainage pond to the east there, in which sodding and other landscaping has been encroached upon onto that property. And there's been complaints by that property owner of activities that have gone on. So there's been a history here that's occurred of activities that have been done that we get involved as a city, either in the middle or after the fact, to try to provide you use of the property. And we've been accommodating to a point on that one. When we're looking at a situation here of the variance request, we're looking at trying to meet those requirements of a hardship, practical difficulty. As we both have noted here, that the difficulty that was created was self-created. Whether we would have advised you to the deck or something else and move your building back, that's a decision ultimately made by a property owner. I can't read someone's mind as far as what's going to be reasonable use of the deck or what they're going to want to do with it on that one. Ultimately, the responsibility is borne upon the person that puts those plans together and the future homeowner.
And I wasn't the one that put those plans together. Unfortunately, I'm the one with it now, trying to make the most of it. And the last thing I'll say is that, I believe we're being reasonable. We're being practical. I'm not the check and balance. I'm a homeowner in the city. When I apply for a building permit and have a general contractor, I'm putting trust in not only our contractor, but the city, and having my best interest in mind, as well as.
But Mr. Martin, you didn't apply for a building permit.
I'd like to finish my thought and then feel free to expound. Always a basement, and there was always a bedroom down there. So wherever the discourse happened with not knowing about an egress window, I'm the one feeling that effect. And that's where the license to encroach came. I didn't know that. And that's all I'm trying to say. I'm not here to argue or be adversarial. I'm just saying, much like this deck, had the communication taken place, Mr. Martin, you're very close to the east side property line here. Let's shift the house here, shift the house there. If we can't shift the house, you need to reconfigure your kitchen to have your patio door on that north side. And then we could have put that window well on the east side of the home. And that would have been a reasonable use to build the deck on the north side. I think that's a great idea. I didn't know this at the time. The ledger board was there. And ultimately, what's preventing us from being able to do that is the fact that we now have an egress window well that's in a poured foundation wall that I can't just dig a hole and move. That's all I'm trying to say, is that we have no practical way to construct a deck on the property the way it currently sits. I think there's plenty of differentiating factors here that would not set a precedent going forward in the city. The fact that it is on a pond, and that, you know, the egress window well being there prevents us from being able to construct the deck on the north side. And, you know, we can argue all day that that's our fault. Like I said, I'm put my property to use in the most reasonable, practical way as I can. And not, like I said, it's not anything that's grandiose affecting property around it. As far as improvements on the property from the owner next to me, I haven't heard anything. And if there is an issue, I'd be more than willing to hear it and come to a resolution on that. I heard anything. And I think for all intents and purposes tonight, that's getting into the weeds. I think we need to on the variance itself and not grass next to a pond. So
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin. Mr. Hallberg, were you thinking about something?
Sure. I guess my question for Mr. Martin is, you applied for the permit for the deck and were denied, but then to start construction on the deck. I'm trying to understand for moving forward and hoping to ask for forgiveness almost after the fact. Kind of want to get into a little bit of, you were denied the deck permit, but you still started construction. So I just wanted to kind of explain your reasonings behind that.
Sure. Reasoning behind that is I felt at the time that city staff held court, and the way it was presented to me was, you know, you can apply for a variance, spend $300, and I don't think it's going to fly, and you're going to do what you're going to do. And what I did, and so feel that, you know, it was given consideration initially. Just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, I guess. So that's all.
You know, we talk about precedents. What's the precedence of someone building a large shed in their backyard and then going to the city going, my permit got denied, but, you know, I did what I had to do. You know, I worry that overstepping and going around the proper procedures, you know, of getting and obtaining the building permit, beginning your construction on your project, that's a real slippery slope that I know I'm comparing apples to oranges between a deck and a shed. Precedent that I worry about being set as well. Kind of just go against the true way of things to be done. We feel as though that it's a hardship issue. For space, I'm going to build this even though the city says I'm not able to. That's one of my big concerns, is which this is proceeded.
Thank you, Mr. Hallberg. Anybody else?
Sure. We mentioned a property back on 5th Street. I don't recall that particular one, but I've been on the commission before. We've taken on variances. on properties over in that area of Hastings, the older properties. And when I look at variances, it's a matter of checking the boxes, so to speak. The properties over on that side of Hastings, most of them have been there from the 50s and the 60s. Okay. And when those owners are requesting variances, it's usually because they are doing improvements to their property that maybe don't necessarily adhere to the current plan. Okay. But they're doing it to improve their property, and they're doing it out of practicality. You only needed a one-car garage back in 1972, and now you need a two. And so those property owners, the definition of hardship, and my definition of hardship, I should say, is those property owners, by virtue of the time that the time of the decade that the property was built in, combined with the lot lines and the way the lot is built, that's the hardship. You know, they bought into a neighborhood that's got a historical nature to it, and there's some limitations there. So sometimes variances don't encroach on a city ordinance or a city requirement are approved. I mean, that's how I look at it. And then the big one is the precedent, and I don't want that to get lost. As soon as this particular home, just by looking at it, looks like it was brand new. A lot more new homes going in. The problem with issuing a variance in this particular type of situation is going forward, you've now issued a variance for every new home that's going to be built on the pond. That's the problem. That's the real problem. Let's take out all the mistakes that were made and the engineering this and whose responsibility was this, that, and the other. The real issue is a variance under this particular situation is very different than a variance on a house that's been there since 1940, 1950. So you can't really compare the two in my mind. So going forward, as you're thinking about which way we're going to go on this, that would probably be the one item that I would be the most concerned with. A precedent that this would set, not only going forward for any new homes, but any newer homes where they were told no and now suddenly want to do this, and they will look at this as a precedent, and then before you know it, you've really just rewritten variance. I mean, you've really just rewritten city. So that's how I look at variances. I look at it from all directions. So when we say hardship, the hardship is more of, you know, what's this person trying to accomplish based on the property that they bought into versus, do I want a deck or don't I want a deck, or do I want a shed or don't I want a shed? Because we've taken up shed variances before and said no. I don't recall exactly which ones they are, but those are the types of things I look at. So notwithstanding all the stuff that happened back in 2018 or 2019 and so forth between the city and so forth, I try to really strip that out of this. And just like he said, just look at the variance itself. And if I do that, that's what I come up with when I take away all of that stuff that happened. That's just my own input.
Thank you, Mr. Messina. I don't know. I look at this from quite a few angles. And I understand the precedence issue, but I think also the chances here, and I can't condone the building the deck without a permit, but I know I've been in a situation here in this city with the side yard setback issues that essentially denied until about the 11th hour in a council meeting in the old neighborhood. It seems like a lot of times see the city staff looking at these things as, you know, but it's a pretty black and white thing. This has got to be a 5 foot setback, and those are the rules. And there's not, you know, and again, we have, as Mr. Messina so well stated, you know, we have that understanding in the older part of the city. We just can't adhere to these things every place. Look at this one. To understand that somewhere along the way there was some miscalculations about where this house sits, not only because of the deck positioning, the egress window. We're here now. That's not much we can do. So look at area on this is to a pond. And, you know, if there were yards next door, this would be, and maybe there's utilities in this right of way or in this easement, or any of those things, or potential for utilities in the future. I would understand that then we've got something to be concerned about. You know, the access is designed with these easements for a reason. Pretty gray one. And there's ways into this pond for any kind of maintenance. Already an encroachment because of some miscalculation down the way. You know, the egress window. I can't condemn. I just can't condone a 7-foot deck. I mean, now we've got a balcony. Making the best out of the situation here. Fortunate enough to, get an approval for like a 2-foot setback. And we were looking for a little bit more to get a wider building, a wider garage built. The old neighborhood and the Model A garage, one wide. Yeah. So we really didn't get a 2-car garage, but I got a little bit more room in width. And yeah, it was, and none of the neighbors were concerned. There's no utilities. We had all this kind of situation. This is even more so. No issue with encroachment. There's no access issues. There won't be lots next door in the future. I just can't. That's the way I'm thinking about this. So anyway, that was my 2 cents. I'm torn a little bit with this thing without the permit, but sometimes I think the city just sees black and white decisions. Should be some common sense associated with some of these easements, and maybe, if this was John looking at this initially, yeah, there's the black and white pieces. It's written in the code. We got to draw the line here for the benefit of a city owner, for no particular reason other than it's the rule. I can't see why that should have to apply here. My 2.5 cents. Any other thoughts or concerns?
I'd like to make a comment.
Commissioner Siebenholler.
I guess with a basin that there are specific reasons why it's the size that it is. Lots were drawn up. They're at. The ponding basin is important and needs to be functioning properly. And so I feel like standing basin is the neighbor, and it's necessary. Had the lot line where it was for a reason. And, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. Looking at, I don't want to focus so much that, it's not going to influence anybody. I mean, I feel like it was meant for a reason. And I know that when I drove by the property, certainly like any homeowner, some people have decks, some people have patios, some people have, like a walkway to a patio, and still being able to enjoy and use their property, and enjoy their property. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Else. Anybody like to make a motion?
To make a motion to deny the variance.
Motion to deny by Siebenaler. The second?
Second.
Second by Hallberg. John, you want to call the roll?
Sure. Mr. Hallberg?
Aye.
Let me clarify this before. So this is a recommendation on the floor for denial. So a vote for yes is a vote to recommend denial of the variance. So just to make that clear as we move forward. So Commissioner Hallberg?
Aye.
Siebenaler? Commissioner Romans?
Aye.
Messina?
You're muted.
Aye.
Commissioner Best?
Aye.
Johnson?
No.
Okay. We'll let the record reflect that that is 5 yeses, 1 no for recommendation of denial of the variance, and that'll move forward to City Council on April 20th.
Okay, moving on to item 7. Is that where we are?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is correct. So we are on item 7, which is the election of a vice chair for the remainder of 2020, would serve in that role. All commissioners having served at least 1 year on the commission, whether that is consecutive or 1 year in total, are eligible to serve. And so nominations for the vice chair position can be made by the commissioners.
Mr. Chairman,
Romans.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Messina if he is so willing.
Any?
So willing. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yes.
All right. Any other nominations?
So I assume, John, that he's eligible?
Sorry, what?
Assume, John, that he is eligible?
Commissioner, that is correct. Mr. Messina would be eligible.
And
Once before, am I supposed to make a statement, or are we just?
I think officially, Mr. Messina, Commissioner, if there is a second on that or any other motions or any other nominations, we can take them at this time.
Okay, sounds good.
you'd be looking for a second?
Correct.
True. All right. Or another nomination.
Correct.
Commissioner Messina.
Second by Hallberg.
Okay. Commissioner Hallberg seconds, and if there's not any other discussion,
I'd be honored. I mean, yes, I'm honored to take on that role. Yes.
okay.
Yes. I haven't done this before, so yes, I'd be honored to take on that role.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well, I could take the roll. Let's see, Commissioner Hallberg. Commissioner Best. Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Romans,
Aye.
Mr. Siebenaller, Mr. Messina.
Aye.
Okay, well, I will reflect that that is a 6-0 vote, and Mr. Messina is now our vice chair of the Planning Commission, so welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
All
Thank you.
right.
Aye.
Any other business, John?
Any other business? Well, we're getting used to using the Zoom platform here. A little bit different. I appreciate your indulgence in its use here. We're not sure, like everyone else right now, how long we will be using this. I would assume through the next Planning Commission meeting or two. Looking at the next Planning Commission, the next one we have scheduled in 2 weeks. I don't have any business for at this time, so that might be a candidate for cancellation. So I'll keep you guys in the loop on that for what happens. We did have a few actions go forward to the City Council last week on April 6th. We did have that comprehensive plan and rezoning for the 1190 County Road 47 property. Both of those were approved. So that property has officially been rezoned, and we'll be awaiting plans to come forward on that one. There also was an approval of an original Hastings design standards for construction of a new home by Habitat for Humanity in the older portion of town. So that was on there as well.
Cool.
In development, the projects that we have, the two senior apartment complexes, real estate equities, and the one by Mint Development. I've talked to both those developers last week. They're still moving forward. Obviously, things change day to day with what's going on, but they're confident that they're moving forward. Same thing, other developments going on around town, the annexation that was approved. They're still moving forward and intend to submit preliminary plat application here in the near future, and we continue to get development inquiries from others. So hopefully that'll continue on. And that's all I had for announcements.
Tell us about the Hudson building.
Oh, the Hudson building. Yeah, with the Hudson building itself, a little bit slower right now, as you can see. What they're planning to do beginning in May is to work on the exterior of the building itself and the exterior grounds. They've committed about $5 to $7 million to do that. They have full funding for the project. It's a matter of getting contractors on site here and getting those contracts together. But the funding for the site is there, and they're continuing to move forward.
Good.
John, can you elaborate on a little bit on the fact that people may have to pay to listen to this meeting?
May have to what?
Pay to listen to this meeting. It was in our packet.
I saw that announcement there too. I know that was a kind of a peculiar item. There will be free public access to the meeting itself. It's being covered on HCTV, so cable will have it there. It's going to be online at our website and HCTV's website as well. So there's free access to it.
So it was a misprint?
I don't know if it was a misprint. I think it was more of a declaration that the software or other mechanisms in which to view the meeting may require some cost, and that cost would not be borne by the city. And I see that our city administrator has clicked off his microphone. Maybe he has something to add.
I think it was just an overly cautious attorney that wrote that.
Has there been consideration for public access, for instance, for people that don't have phones or equipment to be online? I know in times like these, food and rent may be more important to people than keeping a telephone and a computer and internet.
Well, you can call in on the phone for free.
I understand.
The people who dialed in tonight dialed in for free, if I'm not mistaken.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand. My question was especially because, I mean, even on regular times, if someone's going to decide what they're not going to pay for, they are going to either have to pay for their rent or their food. And I think a telephone, because you could have a less expensive option to have a landline, but I think we're in a changing time right now where people are going to be less able to afford telephones, and less able to afford internet connection and tools to come online. So I've been in contact with other cities in the United States where they have made accommodations for people to be able to access if they don't have a telephone nor internet capability.
And Commissioner, I'm not aware of any requests at this point from individuals that are unable to access via economic or other means. If we have those situations come up, I think, we would do our best to accommodate those the best that we could, but we have not had those come to light at this point.
What I've seen the other cities do is they have computers set up at a public location, so the public is made aware of the fact that they can use those for access without having to, especially ask for. I would suspect some people would be, pride would come into place where maybe they just wouldn't ask. I think it needs to be made available. I just wanted to make a comment because I think it's important.
And Commissioner, I agree that it's important to be able to provide avenues open. We're trying to balance that with the distancing requirements and the closure of buildings. And, usually in a situation like
Sure.
we refer people to the public library, which is free and has access to all this information. With the closures due to social distancing, that becomes more of a challenge. And, those situations were to come up in which someone could not able to access for a number of different reasons, we'd work our best to try to accommodate that.
Okay. I just wanted the city to be aware that other cities are handling it and providing. However, but I've got proof of it. but anyways, what I was also going to ask about the city and the newspaper going out of business, because that is the public notice of a public meeting notice platform, and it is going away.
That is correct, Commissioner. So yes, we will need to identify another official newspaper. We're in the process of doing that now, and we plan to have that at an upcoming meeting, certainly before the May 7th deadline for the May 7th final issue of the Hastings Star-Gazette.
So it's sounding like you're going to be outsourcing into the Twin City area?
We're looking at existing newspapers that are out there right now, and we're obligated to select one that meets the state statute requirements for public hearing notification.
Okay, well, I guess I'm hopeful that you'll be able to come up with some kind of a subscription type that more than 2,000 people in Hastings subscribe to. Just know that was the Star Gazette choice. Very limited, very few in as far as percentage of the population that actually receive that newspaper, and I'm concerned again.
Sure. Yeah, I know. I understand. Newspaper subscription and reader rates certainly have changed over the last few years. There are certain state statute requirements that we must adhere to regarding our official newspaper circulation and availability. So we're bound to follow that.
Is the implication that we'd have to be doing something in the Cottage Grove area or Rosemount, or is it some adjoining city? Is that the practicality of it, or?
Specifically on that one, there's options we're looking at. I've not been too involved in the specifics of that. I don't know, Dan, if there's anything that you could share since you're at the meeting.
In terms of timelines, it will be on the city council agenda next Monday, the 20th. Until packets go out on Thursday, I don't know for certain, but I believe the recommendation is going to be the Pioneer Press.
Oh, excellent. All right. Anything else, commissioners?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to make a final statement. Just
absolutely, please.
Possible. I'd just like to thank the city administration for navigating us through this. It's crazy, and I appreciate it. I also know it from a different perspective. So I've seen it on a lot of different levels. And wow, I just want to thank you for your hard work. And I'm looking to my right because it's like the Brady Bunch and you're in the right part. I apologize. But I just want to say thank you very much for all your help. And I also like to thank the citizens of Hastings. They're going along with us on this ride with us. So, and they're navigating it like champs. So for everybody out there, we're continuing the people's business, and I'm very proud of the city and the community for the way they've handled it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well put. Anybody entertain a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to motion to adjourn.
Motion's been made. Second? I'll second it. Call the roll.
Oh, I had to call the roll. That's right. Commissioner Romans,
Aye.
Mr. Hallberg,
Aye.
Mr. Best,
Aye.
Mr. Messina,
Aye.
and Commissioner Siebenhaler.
Aye.